They told me I wasn't qualified. That I should stay quiet, do my job, and not ask too many questions. For years, I did exactly that, until the day I realized they weren't just ignoring me, they were about to make a $90 million mistake. This isn't a story about revenge. It's about knowing your worth when others refuse to see it. It's about reading the fine print when everyone else is too arrogant to bother. And most of all, it's about the power of speaking up when silence is expected. If you've ever felt overlooked, dismissed, or underestimated just because of your title, this story is for you. Welcome to ErasedMe, where we tell stories that echo the quiet strength in all of us, the kind of strength that refuses to disappear quietly. Backhand index pointing right, subscribe and turn on notifications to never miss a story that reminds you, your voice matters, even if they pretend not to hear it. I still remember the smell of that morning, oak polish, burnt espresso, and tension. The kind of tension you don't see, but feel, like the air gets heavier around people with titles too long for one line on a business card. I was standing at the far end of the conference room, sliding leather-bound folders into place like I had 1,000 times before. My heels barely made a sound on the marble floor. I was invisible, the way they liked me, efficient, quiet, forgettable. Nathan Carroll, our CEO, sat at the head of the table like a king in a castle made of glass and stock options. His custom suit probably cost more than my monthly salary, and his smile was razor-sharp, used more for dominance than warmth. The room buzzed with chatter as department heads filled the seats. Everyone was electric with anticipation. The acquisition of Handover Logistics was nearly finalized, a $90 million move that would cement Carroll Holdings' control over the European freight market. I'd prepared every document down to the staple alignment. My hands moved on instinct, but my mind wasn't calm. Something in that contract didn't sit right. I had read it late last night when no one was around, just me, a cup of vending machine coffee, and a quiet knot forming in my chest. As I placed the final binder in front of Nathan, I leaned down slightly and said, softly but clearly, "There's a clause you might want legal to double-check. Page 312, subsection D." Nathan didn't look up. He gave a smirk I had come to dread. Without lifting his eyes from his phone, he said, "Mandy, you're a secretary, not a lawyer. Maybe stick to stapling things, huh?" A few of the execs chuckled, one of them even muttered, "Classic." The air in the room tightened around my lungs. My face felt hot, but I didn't flinch. I smiled politely, nodded, and moved to the next seat. I had mastered that mask years ago. But inside, something cracked. It wasn't loud, not even a break, just a hairline fracture. A shift. I had been with the company for 8 years. I knew everyone's coffee order, the birthdays of their spouses, and the names of the lawyers who now sat laughing across the table. I remembered every major clause from every deal they thought they read. But to them, I was still just Mandy, the girl with the binders. What Nathan didn't know was that I had read the fine print. All of it. And I knew what was hiding there. I stood by the door as the meeting started, holding a clipboard like a prop. My expression stayed calm, but my thoughts raced. For years I had accepted that some people would always see me as invisible. But today was different. Today, I saw a man so confident in his throne that he didn't notice the crack forming beneath his feet. And I wasn't going to warn him again. That night, I didn't go home. I told the team I was staying late to clean up minutes and prep for a vendor call the next day. It wasn't unusual, Mandy, the dependable one, the ghost of the after-hours office. No one questioned me. That's the thing about being invisible for long enough, eventually, people stop looking at all. I waited until the cleaning crew finished vacuuming the hall. The sound of rolling carts faded down the elevator shaft. Then I pulled the thick binder from my desk drawer and opened it under the soft glow of my desk lamp. The silence was complete, broken only by the occasional creak of the HVAC system. Page 312. Subsection D. I read it again, this time slower. My eyes scanned the dormant license clause, a section likely written decades ago, buried under layers of legalese no one cared to recheck. A third party could assume licensing rights for Handover's proprietary logistics software, for $1. A single dollar. The clause was real. Active. And somehow, everyone. Legal, compliance, even the acquisition team, had missed it. I leaned back, stunned. My fingers trembled, not with fear, but with something I hadn't felt in years of power. Quiet, cold, and precise. I suddenly understood something fundamental. It wasn't the people sitting at the table who held power. It was the people who understood what the table was built on. I had a decision to make. For 8 years, I told myself playing it safe was the smart move. Swallow the insult, nod at the condescension, stay 2 steps behind the title holders. I believed if I worked hard enough, eventually someone would notice. That I'd be rewarded for loyalty, not volume. But that belief had quietly bled out years ago, and I hadn't even noticed. So that night, I made a different choice. Not out of revenge. Not out of ego. But because Nathan Carroll had just gambled $90 million on arrogance, and I had the receipt. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table in a threadbare sweatshirt, staring at a copy of the contract spread across the laminate surface like a war map. The apartment was quiet, no traffic sounds, no neighbors banging around upstairs, just the faint hum of the refrigerator and the sharp click of my highlighter moving across the page. I had circled the dormant license clause 3 times. It was absurd. Unthinkable. And yet, fully legal. A third party, any third party, could file a licensing claim with nothing more than a signed form, a $1 fee, and a notarization, so long as it was submitted before the acquisition officially closed. The clause was meant for rare emergencies, for disaster scenarios where the original firm collapsed or disappeared. But it was never removed. Just carried forward. Ignored. Forgotten. Until now. I pored over every related footnote, every reference, every procedural appendix. And when I was done, I opened my laptop and called someone I hadn't spoken to in years, Elena Rivers, a friend from college who had ended up working in corporate compliance. We weren't close anymore, but she was sharp, trustworthy, and knew exactly where the gray areas lived in international trade law. She picked up on the second ring. "I need you to confirm something for me," I said. Off the record. 2 hours and 3 legal databases later, she gave me the answer I already knew but needed to hear out loud. "It's valid, Mandy. Ridiculously obscure, but binding. If you file it correctly and within the window, you'll own it. You'll own the license." I sat back, heartbeat loud in my ears. For a long moment, I didn't move. Then I stood, changed out of my sweatshirt, and put on a blazer like armor. I wasn't reckless. If I was going to do this, it would be by the book. Ironclad. At 12:47 p.m. the next day, during the office lunch lull when no one would miss me, I walked 3 blocks to a notary office tucked behind a dry cleaner. It smelled like toner and floor polish. The notary was a woman in her 60s with silver hair pulled into a bun and readers perched halfway down her nose. She barely looked up as I handed her the form. $1, she said, quirking an eyebrow. I placed the bill on the desk, crisp and folded in half. "Hope this works out for you," she added, stamping the document with a metallic thunk. I smiled. Me too. When I returned to the office, everything looked the same: Nathan yelling into his phone behind glass, interns chatting too loud by the coffee machine, a stream of marketing people debating fonts. No one noticed the shift. No one saw the tectonic plate quietly sliding beneath their feet. But I did. That afternoon, I emailed a scanned copy of the filing to my personal inbox, then deleted the history. Not because I was hiding, but because I was preparing. I was still the secretary with the quiet smile and steady hands. But now, I also happened to own the most critical license for a $90 million acquisition. They just didn't know it yet. 2 days passed. On the surface, nothing changed. The office still hummed with its usual rhythm, emails flying, printers jamming, small talk echoing through the hallway. Nathan strutted through meetings like a man already immortalized in Forbes. If he sensed anything brewing, he didn't show it. But I knew better. The tension wasn't loud. It crept in quietly. Like smoke before fire. Then, on the morning of the third day, the shift happened. At exactly 9:15 a.m., a lawyer from the acquisition firm stormed into Nathan's office. No knock, no pleasantries. Just a slam of the glass door behind him and a voice too sharp to ignore. By noon, the legal team was in full lockdown, closed-door meetings, whispered arguments, red folders stacked like barricades on every table. I kept my eyes on my screen, but my ears caught everything. The license is frozen. Someone filed a claim. It's holding up the entire deal. By 1:30 p.m., Nathan summoned the executive team for an urgent update. I wasn't invited. But then again, I didn't need an invitation. The office walls might have been made of glass, but people still whispered. And I had spent the better part of a decade learning how to listen without looking like I was listening. That afternoon, Nathan walked past my desk without acknowledging me. His jaw was tight. His tie was loosened. And the smirk he wore so effortlessly was gone. I went home that night with a strange feeling in my chest, half fear, half clarity. It was working. But I also knew it wouldn't be long before he came for me. And he did. The next morning, I hadn't even made it through my second sip of coffee before my phone buzzed. The screen lit up, Nathan Carroll. I stared at the name. My thumb hovered over the answer button. Then I pressed it. Mandy, he said, clipped and cold. My office. Now. There was no good morning. No polite mask. Just steel. I walked the long corridor toward his glass office, feeling every pair of eyes follow me. But this time, I didn't shrink under their weight. I didn't feel small. I felt certain. Nathan was waiting behind his desk, hands shoved in his pockets, jaw flexing like he was trying not to grind his teeth into dust. The skyline framed him like a portrait of a man clinging to control. Close the door, he said. I did. He didn't sit. Instead, he paced once, then turned sharply. A dormant license claim was filed, he said slowly, watching me for a reaction. I offered none. And imagine my surprise, he continued, when I learned it was filed by my secretary. I met his eyes, calm and even. I followed the procedure outlined in the original agreement. It's a legal claim. He scoffed. Legal or not, you had no right. You blindsided this company. You jeopardized a $90 million deal with a stunt. No, I said, voice steady. You jeopardized it. I tried to warn you. Nathan's face reddened. This is insubordination. No, Nathan, I corrected. This is accountability. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he walked around the desk and leaned in, voice low. You want a payout? Name your price. Let's end this quietly. I didn't file for money. His expression twisted, like he couldn't compute that answer. Then what the hell do you want? I want you to understand that just because someone doesn't wear a title you respect doesn't mean their voice doesn't matter. I warned you. You laughed. You ignored me. That was your choice. He stepped back, exhaling sharply. You're playing a dangerous game. No, I said. I'm playing by the rules. You just didn't bother to read them. The meeting ended with no resolution. Just silence. But Nathan didn't stop there. At 5:03 p.m., an email popped up from HR. Subject, formal inquiry into conduct, immediate response required. I opened it, pulse steady. They were investigating me for unauthorized interference with corporate contractual agreements. I almost laughed. Almost. It was textbook retaliation. He thought he could paint me as unstable, emotional, reckless. But I had already hired legal counsel. I forwarded the email to my attorney. And just like that, the next phase began. Nathan believed he was playing chess. He hadn't realized I'd already flipped the board. The morning air outside the building was sharp with the scent of cold steel and burned espresso, typical signs of a boardroom battle in the making. I arrived early, deliberately so. Not because I wanted to get ahead of whatever Nathan was planning, but because I needed to walk into that glass fortress on my own terms. The office was buzzing in an unfamiliar way. HR's heads were down, eyes avoiding mine. Legal shuffled back and forth with folders pressed tightly to their chests. The CFO, normally gregarious and smug, barely made eye contact. Something had changed. Not just in the structure, but in the energy. Fear had shifted direction. And I was no longer the target. At 10:42 a.m., I got the call. Boardroom. Now, said the clipped voice of Richard Clark's assistant. I stood, smoothed my blazer, and walked the corridor lined with mirrored glass. My reflection followed me, steady, composed, deliberate. For the first time in my career, I didn't feel like I was stepping into a room I didn't belong in. I was the room. Inside, every seat at the long table was filled. Nathan sat at the far end, arms crossed, eyes narrowed, jaw locked so tight I thought he might crack a molar. Richard Clark, chairman of the board, gestured to the seat across from him. I nodded once and took my place. Let's begin, Richard said, voice even. The silence that followed was oppressive. You could hear the faint hum of the AC vents. Then Richard placed a folder on the table, fingers spread flat across it like he was about to pray. We've reviewed the documents Ms. Harris submitted, he said. As well as corresponding statements from legal, HR, and compliance. We've also consulted with external legal counsel. I watched Nathan shift slightly in his chair. This acquisition, Richard continued, has been jeopardized by a critical oversight. That much is clear. What remains in question is how this happened. And how we move forward. He turned to me first. Ms. Harris. You filed the license claim as a private individual? Yes, sir. Did you use company resources to do so? No. I used public documents, my own time, and filed through an independent notary. Were you aware that withholding the license could delay or cancel the acquisition? Yes, I said, calm. But I warned Mr. Carroll 3 days prior to the claim. He dismissed it. Richard nodded once, then turned slowly toward Nathan. Mr. Carroll, did Ms. Harris bring the clause to your attention before filing? Nathan's jaw ticked. She made a comment. It wasn't. Yes or no? He inhaled sharply. Yes. Did you escalate that concern to legal? Nathan hesitated. No. I didn't think it was significant. And do you now acknowledge that her claim is, in fact, legally valid? Another pause. Yes. The room stayed still. Richard exhaled. Noted. For the next 40 minutes, the board dissected everything: Nathan's refusal to escalate, the HR retaliation, the rushed investigation. Every tactic he used to silence me became a documented liability. Every email he'd ordered. Every misstep he'd spun. He tried to talk his way out, blaming the legal team, downplaying my role, suggesting I acted out of spite. But no one was buying it anymore. The board members weren't interested in theatrics. They had spreadsheets, receipts, timelines, and testimony. I didn't have to say much. The truth was already loud enough. Then came the final moment. Richard folded his hands, voice steady. Effective immediately, Nathan Carroll is placed on administrative leave pending further review. Your access will be revoked, and you may collect your belongings under supervision. Nathan's mouth opened in protest, but Richard raised a single hand. Don't. The silence that followed was deafening. Nathan looked around the room, perhaps hoping for a single ally, a nod, anything. None came. When his eyes met mine, it wasn't anger I saw. It was disbelief. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I simply held his gaze. Because I wanted him to remember this look, the quiet confidence of a woman he had once dismissed as background noise. As the meeting adjourned, Richard approached me quietly. You handled yourself with professionalism and restraint, he said. Thank you, sir. We'll need your help managing the aftermath. Hanover's attorneys are already circling. I'll be ready. And I meant it. Because this was no longer just about a clause or a contract. This was about everything Nathan never understood, how power doesn't always wear a title, and sometimes the quietest person in the room holds the sharpest weapon of all. Knowledge. The email came quietly. No bold subject line. No capital letters or exclamation points. Just a simple message from Richard Clark's assistant. Please join us in the executive conference room at 9 a.m. Richard would like a word. This time, I didn't feel nervous. I didn't rehearse a dozen ways to respond. I buttoned my blazer, took the elevator to the top floor, and stepped into the glass-walled room with a steady breath. Richard was already there, standing by the window, sipping black coffee from a white ceramic mug. He didn't turn when I entered. You saved the deal, he said finally, eyes still on the skyline. I almost destroyed it, I replied honestly. He turned then, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. You exposed a flaw that could have ruined this company's reputation and finances. But you didn't do it to burn bridges. You did it because no one else would. I sat down. My hands were still, but my pulse wasn't. He walked over and placed a folder in front of me. We want you to stay on, he said. Not just in your current role. We're creating a new one, Director of Risk and Contract Strategy. It reports directly to the executive board. I blinked. For a moment, I thought I had misheard. That's a real position? It is now, Richard said, with no trace of irony. I don't want it if it's symbolic, I said. I need authority. Autonomy. The ability to flag problems without asking for permission to speak. Richard gave a quiet laugh, not out of amusement, but respect. You've earned that. There was no round of applause, no grand promotion party. Just a conversation between two professionals who understood that doing the right thing doesn't always come with applause, but it should come with power. 2 weeks later, I was in meetings with legal, compliance, and Hanover's top counsel, tightening every clause, double-checking every term. The deal moved forward. This time, with eyes wide open. And for the first time in 8 years, I wasn't the quiet one in the room. I was the voice they leaned in to hear. Nathan Carroll resigned 2 days later. No grand announcement. No farewell speech. Just a sterile internal memo dropped in everyone's inbox at 8:47 a.m. Effective immediately, Mr. Carroll has stepped down from his position as CEO for personal reasons. We thank him for his service. But no one believed the words. Not really. In the break room, whispers floated through the air like smoke. He got forced out, right? Did you hear Mandy was the one who caught it? She's not just a secretary anymore. I said nothing. There was no satisfaction in watching him walk out of the building with his box of awards and signed footballs. No part of me craved revenge anymore. I hadn't fought to destroy him. I fought to be heard, and to make sure no one else had to whisper to be taken seriously again. I moved into my new office that Monday. It wasn't glamorous. No corner view, no custom furniture. But the door had my name on it, and for the first time, that meant something. I spent late nights reviewing contracts, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I was rebuilding trust from the inside, one clause at a time. One evening, after a marathon negotiation session, I found myself alone in the boardroom again. The same room where Nathan once mocked me. Now, I sat at the head of the table. Richard stopped by with 2 coffees. He handed me one, then paused as he looked around the room. "You know," he said, "most people would have walked away." I stared at the skyline beyond the glass. The city didn't look different, but I did. "I didn't set out to win," I said softly. "I just refused to lose quietly." He nodded. "That's exactly why you're here. Some victories don't come with applause. They come with peace. And the knowledge that next time someone like me speaks up, they won't be laughed out of the room. Sometimes the quietest voice in the room is the one that sees the most." Mandy's journey reminds us that integrity, courage, and truth don't always roar, they endure. For years, she was overlooked, underestimated, and dismissed simply because of her title. But titles don't define character. She didn't rise through cruelty or ambition. She rose because she refused to accept a system that rewarded arrogance and silenced reason. Her strength wasn't in loud defiance but in quiet persistence. She warned her superiors with good faith, and when they ignored her, she didn't retaliate out of revenge, she acted out of principle. Mandy's story teaches us that doing the right thing often means standing alone, walking into uncomfortable rooms, and trusting in the truth when no one else does. More than anything, this story is about self-worth. Mandy didn't demand respect, she earned it, on her terms. And when the moment came, she didn't scream for recognition. She simply did what was necessary, with precision, grace, and conviction. In a world that too often favors power over principle, Mandy proved that real change comes not from breaking the system with force, but from exposing its cracks with truth. Because courage isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's just refusing to stay silent when silence is the easiest thing to do.